For New, I have made a series of essentially two works. So one of them is a large sculpture called Weeping Woman, which references Picasso's Weeping Woman. And the other one is two ceramic works based on Morandi paintings. Obviously Picasso and Morandi are both last century modernist painters. Both of their practices are very, very different. And I've tried to kind of find a thread or an arc that runs between them, and I've tried to sort of bring these together or distill these similarities in my work. So the main thing being a perceptual interest that they both have, which is sort of my enduring interest in how that operates in an artwork and in the process of viewing an artwork. I'm interested in form and ground being an unstable thing rather than a stable thing. With the Morandi ceramics or the sculpture, I didn't work with his source material. His source material was bottles, just really banal bottles. But I was interested in working with what he gave the viewer, which is a very formal meditation on light and object. The subject matter is kind of emptied out of the work, and that was my entry into his work. And then I took that out and worked with line and light in a three-dimensional way. You know, that process of deferral sort of ends up being further and further away from that source material, and it takes on its own meaning with every sort of cycle away from the original source material. It eventually, at some point, and I'm not sure which point, but it takes on its own originality. So it's not appropriating something else anymore, it's its own entity. With the Weeping Woman, I was interested in how much I can subtract from the object and still have the spirit of the work. And when I was testing out the water irrigation and so on, the sculptural piece, the aluminium, none of that was there. It was just the eye suspended with this water coming out, and I thought, this is the work. It's contained in the simplest possible way, which is just the weeping eye, and the rest is conceptual. You don't need any more information. I'm interested in the way that I've absorbed over my lifetime the visual data that has come from these iconic works. I mean, I've seen the Weeping Woman on, you know, tea coasters, wall calendars. So it's that sort of lifetime of looking that I've just tried to distill into the work. I'm not making a direct literal reference to the piece, except through the title, obviously. I'm interested in perception in a way that it reveals things rather than conceals things. I'm not interested in creating illusions. I'm interested in making them apparent. So it's like the inner mechanism of the object. The large sculpture, for example, is totally unfinished. All the raw workings are evident. You can actually see hand marks from where it was installed. There's no concealing over anything. I think the period of modernism interests me because it was such a distinctive, male-dominated, patriarchal period where the key sort of principles of modernism were autonomous objects and artworks, resolution of each piece. You know, everything was sort of these bold, big statements. And I like to play with that language of that period, but through a postmodern lens. So that's why it was important for me that the level of finish in my pieces, well, if there's a continuous level of process where you begin the work here and you end it here, I like to see at which point I can finish it, how far back I can pull that finish point. So in the modernist period, they would have taken it to the most resolved, refined point of completion. Whereas if I can just put a full stop here or wrap it up here, then it leaves so much more breathing space for the work. That's why I feel that a lot of the works are unresolved technically. For me, that sort of becomes then a critique of that discourse, of that modernist discourse, rather than making these, you know, big, bold, like echoing these bold sort of gestures. I'm trying to sort of deconstruct them or just make them more, enable a sort of a humanity or an anthropocentricity into the work. I think the unfinished nature of the works gives them an entry point and maybe a generosity to the viewer.